I kind of turned around, framed, and pressed the button. I had a little flashlight on. Well, this guy jumped up, and he had the agility of an Olympic runner and chased me around Grand Central Station. I, of course, got away with it. I still have that photograph. And, so I had encounters like that. And when you're young, you kind of like, you like the kind of the hunt, the whole thing.
That's the voice of Ed Coppola, lifelong photographer recounting the time he photographed a man in Grand Central Station who didn't respond too well, to say the least. Welcome to the Photo Bio Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Dominkowitz. In today's episode, I talk with Ed Coppola about his journey of becoming an accomplished photographer.
I always gravitated towards the visual arts even as a young child. But photography was different. Photography, I never really thought about getting into it a lot. And there weren't a lot of cameras in my house, My mother didn't have a camera. My father may have. He passed away when I was very young. I had relatives that took photographs. They had cameras, and I popped up in a few family 8mm movies. I found out about decades later. But my first intriguement with using a camera was when I was about 10 years old. It was maybe 1967. And the cool kid on the block, who was like maybe 5 or 6 years older than me, Frankie DeLeo, I'll never forget his name, because his younger brother went to school with me, was taking a picture of the telephone pole on the corner. And I was coming home from some errand, my mother said. He was photographing, and it was the summertime, it was bright sunlight, like staples and things. And I go, Frank, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm taking a picture of all this cool stuff here. And I always was a very visual kid. I could think way back to things I would contemplate as a child. I think back maybe as far as age 3, and I was never bored, ever, as a child. Never a bored kid, because I always was just looking at things, and I thought, well, wouldn't that be great, to be able to then capture it, take it back. So running home, this was the summer, my birthday's in August. I said, I know what I want for my birthday. I want a camera. And it was the time when the Kodak advertised this thing called an Instamatic camera, and a little cube on it that had 4 flashes, and it would spin, and you got a little cartridge, and they advertised it as so simple and easy. And you take the cartridge and you just put it in the back of the camera, close it, follow the instructions of how far away to stand, press the button, and then you had to wind it to the next picture. And it had something like a ridiculous amount of pictures because the negatives were teeny, teeny, tiny. Like smaller than, maybe it was 110 format, I'm going to guess. Anyway, I got it. And I ran out and I shot the first roll of pictures. And I brought it home, and we had to then bring it to the local drugstore to be processed. And I got back all these pictures. I was so excited of all kinds of disjointed things. My dog, my neighbor, And I said, okay, I need more film. And my mother looked at me like, what are you, crazy? Do you have any idea how much that costs? You only take a camera out if it's like your birthday, it's, a holiday, somebody dies maybe. I thought that could be interesting, but, film is expensive. You got to wait now. And I kind of lost interest in it. I still have the camera. And then it was one day I land in college, and I had to take a photography class, and you had to have one class in photography. And I had a job as a college assistant at Kingsborough. I worked in the ceramic shop, and I saved my paycheck. And then the newest camera then was the Canon AE1 camera. It was also advertised on TV, and I didn't know anything. That's all I knew from television. And I went to Kings Plaza to Macy's and bought it. I still have it.
During his time in college, Ed received lots of encouragement from his professors to continue with photography. However, he did not have an interest in being a simple commercial photographer. But after he graduated, he would continue to be around the world of photography, working in film labs around the city.
I loved working in the darkroom. It reminded me a lot of cooking, because my mother, I was a single parent home, and I was interested and invested in the kitchen and cooking and things like that. And I liked chemicals, so it wasn't like oppressive for me to work in a dark room with the orange lights and the water running. And I worked for a lot of big labs. I worked for Time Life when it was still called Time Life. And I got to meet a lot of famous photojournalists. I got to meet Alfred Eisenstadt, who would come in and talk to us about, these photographs we're printing. I'm printing pictures of Marilyn Monroe and the Beatles that he took, and he tells stories, and Carl Maidans and Gordon Parks. You couldn't miss him. He had a big white mustache and all these amazing photographs, of Gordon Parks. And we had a lounge that overlooked Radio City Music Hall. And these guys, these people would come in and we would talk to them about, really about history more than, photographs themselves.
Throughout the time he was working in the labs, Ed would still continue to take photos all around the city, capturing a variety of unique scenes and people.
Maybe I come back with some okay photographs. Maybe I come back. Now I look back at what I call my greatest hits, some really great stuff. But, it would be a while before I would focus on a particular project. By, the late 70s, early 80s, I'm a young man, and, I'm into the bohemian scene in the city, and I started to go to little out-of-the-way clubs in the Lower East Side. I wasn't that much interested in, like, the real punk scene. I was interested in these kind of odd little places, and I really liked the photography of the 1930s. Some of the Depression-era photographs were interesting to me. I ran into a bar in the Lower East Side that was like an old person's bar in the day, and it was owned by two brothers who had a lock company called Lynch Locks. They were the Lynch brothers. And at night it was a blues bar. But it was like something out of a photograph by Dorothea Lange or Russell Lee. It's like of the South and the Chitlin Trail in the 1930s. And it hadn't changed. The interior hadn't changed since around that time. And I photographed there extensively for a while. I'm kind of really interested in how people define their personal spaces. How they view, the home as there's a lot of psychology in how people arrange things around their private spaces. Maybe the most important private space, which is where they live.
Ed's most recent work, In Island, Staten Island, is a collection of photos taken in Staten Island, where he currently resides. The photos were exhibited all around the city, even at the Photoville Festival.
Now, there's another one that gives you an idea.
Wow.
Yeah, there's many of those. And, of course, the real estate market is kind of crazy, but I didn't really want to make it just about that either. I wanted to kind of keep it visual, because you can get into then a kind of photojournalism thing, which I love, but I wanted to keep it something more that kind of connected to the pace of or the spirit of the place, or the way I saw it. And I had a show at Wagner College, which is a private college. There's a very nice gallery on Staten Island. The reaction from people that live there, said, wow, you really get us. You really got us there. I didn't think I was going to. I wasn't really sure what I got, because I thought a lot of them were just quirky things that I found interesting. And, my whole joy of that first encounter, learning about, that you can photograph whatever you want with your camera. And if you really see something, it'll be interesting to other people. And I was very fortunate to see that I was right. People could see this mundane object, and because of the way it was lit, but because of the way I isolated it and structured it in my composition, they got it. And I didn't really care if they did or they didn't, because I'm lucky I have this job. I don't have to make a living doing it. But it's purely it's life essential for me to. I think any artist will tell you that, to do the work. You'll do it anyway. Even I think they think you got to be willing to take risks and make bad work. Because otherwise you don't do anything at all. Just to keep that momentum going and learn from the doing of it. Recently, over COVID, started scanning some of those things and posting them on Facebook, and I got all these amazing responses from people, who, I remember that, I remember this. So now I'm looking back at my archive more, and I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to retire in a year or so. I better do this. I better get it there. These things will end up in a dumpster, otherwise who knows where they'll end up. And now, of course, like a lot of photographers, I haven't written off shooting film. I love film. I love teaching it. It's a spectacular way to teach photography. You learn from film. There's so much you can still do. There's so much stability in the piece of film.
To see more of Ed's photography and his other art, check out his page, edwardcoppola.tumblr.com. That is edwardcoppola.tumblr.com. This is Joseph Dominkowitz. Thank you for listening.